The sound of a distant, sharp scream echoed through the quiet streets of the small town. Ava stood frozen outside the cafe, her hand still on the door handle, caught between the familiar hum of her daily life and the deafening noise that cut through it like a knife. She had just clocked in for her evening shift, the sun sinking behind the horizon, casting the last golden rays across the pavement. Inside, the clinking of glasses and the chatter of regulars filled the air, as if nothing had happened. But the scream, it was no ordinary cry. It was the kind of scream that shivered through your bones, carrying with it the weight of a truth that nobody was ready to face. Ava stepped forward, her heart racing, uncertainty clawing at her chest. It was then that she saw him, her father's old friend, standing in the doorway, staring at her with wide eyes, the color draining from his face. What had he just seen? And why did it feel like the ground beneath her feet was about to collapse? Inside the cafe, the air felt heavy, charged with an unspoken tension. Ava's heartbeat raced as she took in the sight of the man who had been part of her father's past, yet whom she had only seen in fleeting glimpses during her childhood. He wasn't supposed to be here. The patrons continued their casual conversations, oblivious to the storm that had just been set in motion. She moved towards him, the sound of her footsteps muffled by the soft buzz of the cafe's lights. He hadn't seen her yet, but she could sense his discomfort. She stood before him now, searching for a sign, any sign, that this was a mistake. The man looked up, and their eyes locked. He didn't need to speak for her to understand. His expression said it all. It was too late. Ava stopped just in front of his table, her heart pounding in her chest. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The man opened his mouth, as if to say something, but then hesitated. He wiped his hand across his forehead, trying to gather his thoughts. "Ava, there are things about your father's past." His words trailed off, heavy with unspoken truths. The sound of clinking glasses and quiet chatter from nearby tables felt distant, as if the cafe had suddenly turned into a hollow shell. Ava's mind raced. What was he about to reveal? And why now? Her father had always been a mystery to her, but this felt different. This felt like a key to a door that had been locked for too long. The air between them thickened, each word hanging like a weight in the air. "What do you know about my father?" Ava asked, her voice trembling but determined. The man's gaze flickered, and for a moment he seemed to shrink back. "Ava, you don't understand. Your father was involved in something dangerous." The words felt like a blow to her chest. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice rising. His hands shook as he placed the coffee cup down, his gaze never leaving hers. "You should never have come here," he whispered. The cafe felt suffocating now, the dim lights doing little to lift the suffocating weight of his words. Ava's heart pounded louder now as the man's words sank in. "What kind of danger?" she pressed. "What did my father do?" The man closed his eyes, as though trying to escape the weight of the truth. He was involved in a political scandal, something that ruined lives. People died because of him. Ava recoiled as though she'd been slapped. This was the truth she had never wanted to hear, the truth that shattered the foundation of everything she had known about her father. "No," she whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. But the man didn't say anything more. He simply stood up, his face pale, as if he couldn't bear to be in her presence any longer. Ava watched him go, the realization hitting her like a wave, pulling her under. Ava's mind buzzed as she walked down the street, each step a quiet echo against the pavement. Her fingers brushed her phone, still gripped tightly in her hand, but she didn't know who to call, didn't know what to say. The man's words replayed over and over in her head, twisting and warping her understanding of the life she thought she knew. Your father was involved in a political scandal. People had died because of him. She had always known her father was distant, but this was something else entirely. The cafe had been too small for the enormity of the revelation, and now the world felt too big. Her father, a man who had always been a shadow in her life, was now a ghost in her thoughts. The questions felt endless, suffocating. Had she been blind all these years? Or was it simply that her father had managed to hide his true self from everyone? Ava quickened her pace, her heart pounding faster than her feet could carry her. Ava arrived at her apartment building, her hand still clutched tightly around her phone. She stood outside for a moment, staring at the entrance as if it might offer some kind of answer. The cold air seemed to bite at her skin, but it was the heaviness in her chest that chilled her the most. She stepped inside and made her way up the narrow staircase. The hallway was quiet, save for the faint hum of the elevator in the distance. She passed her neighbor's door, then stopped in front of her own. She paused before turning the knob, the weight of everything she had just learned pushing her down, making her shoulders slump. As she stepped inside, the familiar smell of her apartment wrapped around her, comforting and suffocating all at once. She dropped her bag onto the floor and collapsed onto the couch, her head spinning. She wanted to scream, to throw the world off her shoulders. But instead, she stared blankly at the wall, her mind a storm. The night stretched on endlessly. Ava couldn't sleep, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts, none of them bringing her peace. She stared out the window of her apartment, the city below bathed in the glow of streetlights. It was all so normal, so ordinary, yet everything had shifted. She thought of her mother, who had always been distant, a woman of few words and fewer emotions. Had she known? Did she hide it from Ava all these years? What kind of man had her father been? She couldn't shake the images of the older man at the cafe, his expression filled with regret. Ava's thoughts circled back to the word, scandal. What did it mean? Was it just politics, or had her father been involved in something darker, something that reached into the lives of others? With a deep sigh, Ava grabbed her phone once more. She needed answers, but she wasn't sure where to start. The next day, Ava couldn't stop herself. She had to know more. She had to find out the truth, no matter how painful. Her phone rang in her hand, the number flashing across the screen. Lena, her childhood friend, the one person Ava had always confided in. She had to talk to Lena to figure out if there was something she was missing. Ava swallowed the lump in her throat and pressed the green button, bringing the phone to her ear. "Lena, we need to talk," she said, her voice tight. On the other end of the line, Lena's voice sounded hesitant. "Ava, are you sure?" There was an odd pause before Lena continued. "This isn't something you want to get into." But Ava was determined. "I need to know everything, Lena. I can't keep living in the dark." The silence on the other end of the line stretched too long before Lena finally spoke, her voice heavy with regret. "Okay," she said softly, "I'll meet you." Later that evening, Ava sat at the small cafe they had agreed to meet at. Her fingers tapped nervously against the table, her gaze flickering to the door every few seconds. She had never felt this on edge before. Lena had always been a calming presence in her life, the one person who understood the parts of her that she could never explain to anyone else. Now, it felt like Lena was the last piece of the puzzle that could complete the picture of her father's dark past. When the door opened, Ava's breath caught in her throat. Lena stood in the doorway, looking as uncertain as Ava felt. Their eyes met, and for a moment, there was an unspoken tension between them. Lena stepped forward and sat down slowly, her eyes scanning Ava's face. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" Lena asked quietly, and Ava nodded. "I have to be." Ava met Lena at the same cafe again the next morning. "I'm said whoa." This time, there was no hesitation in her step. As she entered, her gaze immediately locked with Lena's, who was already seated, nervously stirring her coffee. Ava didn't waste any time. "Tell me everything, Lena," she said, her voice tight with urgency. Lena hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup, a silent struggle playing out across her face. Finally, she exhaled deeply and met Ava's eyes. "I didn't want you to get involved in this," Lena said softly. "But your father's past is far darker than you realize. It's not just a political scandal, it's personal." Ava's heart skipped a beat. "What does that mean?" she demanded, leaning forward. Lena's voice dropped to a whisper, as if afraid someone might overhear. "There's a family secret, Ava. Something buried so deep that not even your mother knew about it. The words hung heavy in the air between them. Ava's breath caught as she processed Lena's words. A family secret? She repeated, her voice barely audible. Lena nodded slowly, her eyes clouded with guilt. Your father was involved in something dangerous. There was a betrayal. He wasn't just a politician, he was part of a larger scheme. But it wasn't just business. It was personal. Ava's mind raced, the pieces of her father's life slipping further out of her grasp. Who did he betray? Ava asked, barely able to keep the fear out of her voice. Lena shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I don't know all the details, Ava, but I know he made enemies, powerful ones, and they've been looking for revenge. The room seemed to close in around Ava, and she felt her pulse quicken. What kind of enemies? She asked, her voice trembling. Lena's face hardened. The kind who don't forget. The kind who will do anything to protect their own. The words echoed in Ava's mind as she walked through the city streets that evening, the light from street lamps casting long shadows. She tried to wrap her head around everything Lena had told her, but it felt like she was suffocating under the weight of it all. How had she not known any of this? Her father, a man she had always thought of as distant and withdrawn, was now a stranger to her. She reached for her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed her mother's number. The line rang 3 times before her mother answered. Ava? Her voice sounded tired, as though she hadn't slept. I need to know everything, Mom. Ava said, her voice tight with emotion. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. What are you talking about? Her mother asked, a hint of fear creeping into her voice. Ava closed her eyes, fighting back tears. About Dad, the secrets, I need to know. Ava's mother's voice came through, hesitant and strained. I never wanted you to know, Ava. There were things things he did that were beyond our control. I stayed because I thought it was the safest choice for you. Ava's heart raced. What did he do? She demanded, the words spilling out. Why didn't you tell me? There was a long pause on the line. Because I didn't want you to live with the same burden. I didn't want you to suffer the way I did. Ava's chest tightened, her pulse racing. Tell me what happened, she insisted. Her mother finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. He betrayed us all, Ava. He was involved in a scandal that hurt people. Real people. And the people who were hurt, they didn't forget. Ava's knees felt weak, the shock threatening to break her down. The truth was more dangerous than she could have imagined. Ava stood at the edge of the rooftop. The city sprawled beneath her in a sea of lights. The cool breeze ruffled her hair, but she barely felt it. Her mother's words still echoed in her mind. He betrayed us all. Her father, the man she had spent so many years trying to understand, was part of something far darker than she ever could have imagined. The realization hit her like a wave, suffocating her. She could feel the weight of the past bearing down on her, and for the first time, she understood why her mother had stayed silent. It wasn't just about protecting her, it was about protecting them both from the truth. But now Ava knew she had to face it. She had to confront the past, no matter the cost. With a deep breath, she turned away from the edge of the building, determined to dig deeper. There was no turning back. Ava arrived at Lena's apartment, her heart racing with anticipation. The tension between them had been growing, and Ava knew that Lena held the final key to unlocking the mystery surrounding her father's past. As the door clicked open, Lena stood there, her face pale, and her eyes filled with an emotion Ava couldn't quite place. Lena, I need to know, Ava said, her voice barely a whisper, but filled with an urgency that made Lena hesitate. There was something different in the air tonight, a charged silence that seemed to hang between them. Lena stepped aside, allowing Ava to enter. She gestured to the living room where they could sit, but Ava wasn't in the mood for pleasantries. What did you mean when you said my father betrayed us? Ava asked bluntly. Lena took a deep breath and sat down slowly. Her face remained hard, but her hands trembled. Ava, I've known this whole time. I didn't want you to be part of it. Ava sat down across from Lena, the silence between them heavy and thick with unspoken words. You've known this whole time. Why didn't you tell me? Ava's voice cracked with emotion, but her eyes burned with a desire for the truth. Lena shifted uncomfortably, her gaze dropping to her hands. Because I knew how much it would hurt you. I thought you were better off not knowing what kind of man your father really was. Ava's breath caught in her throat. What did he do, Lena? Tell me. There was a long pause before Lena finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. He was involved in a cover-up that cost people their lives. The words hit Ava like a slap. A cover-up? Her father, a man she had only known in the context of being distant and elusive, was somehow implicated in something much darker. The realization sank in, and Ava felt the world around her begin to tilt. Ava's mind reeled. A cover-up, she repeated, trying to make sense of it all. What happened? Who's involved? Her voice was shaking, the shock of the revelation settling in like a weight in her chest. Lena's eyes flickered to the window, avoiding Ava's gaze. I can't say much more. You need to understand, Ava, that the people who are involved are dangerous. They have the power to destroy everything in their path. Ava's frustration boiled over. Who are they, Lena? Who did my father betray? Lena stood up abruptly, her hands shaking. I can't tell you, she said, her voice a mix of fear and guilt. It's too late for that. Ava stood as well, feeling her pulse quicken. What do you mean it's too late? She demanded. Lena's eyes locked with hers, filled with silent regret. The people your father betrayed are coming for you now. You've already started digging, and they're not going to stop until they silence you. Ava stood frozen for a moment, the weight of Lena's words crashing over her. Coming for me? Ava's voice was barely a whisper, thick with disbelief. What do you mean? Lena's face softened, her eyes filled with regret. I never wanted this for you, Ava, she said quietly. But you've uncovered something you can't undo. Your father's involvement goes far beyond what I told you. He was working with people who didn't care about the consequences. And now, they'll stop at nothing to cover up what happened. Ava's mind was spinning, but she couldn't let this fear consume her. I can't let this go, Lena, she said, her voice hardening. I need to know the truth. I need to understand why he did this. Lena's face twisted with pain, and for a moment, it felt like she was going to say more. But then, she lowered her gaze, as if there was no more to say. It's too dangerous, Ava. You have no idea what you're up against. Ava turned away from Lena, her mind reeling from the truth that had just been revealed. The walls seemed to close in around her, and she felt as if the ground beneath her feet was shifting. She had come here seeking answers, but what she had found was far more dangerous than she had anticipated. The idea that her father's betrayal had led to so many lives lost, the idea that she was now a target, was almost too much to bear. But there was no turning back now. She had to face whatever came next. I'm not afraid, she said to herself, her voice steady, though the uncertainty in her eyes betrayed her. I won't let them control me. Ava turned to Lena one last time. Thank you for telling me, but this isn't over. Lena stood silently, watching her, knowing there was nothing more she could do to stop her. Ava's gaze hardened, and she walked out of the apartment, ready to take the next step into the unknown. Ava stood before the doors of the towering building, its sleek glass exterior reflecting the night sky. Inside, the powerful figures responsible for her father's downfall were waiting. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. This was the moment she had been building toward, one that could either destroy everything or set her free. Her fingers clenched into fists as she stared at the doors, feeling her heart thud against her ribs. She had spent so many years running from the truth, burying it under layers of denial. But now, the truth had caught up to her, and she could either expose it or allow it to consume her. The stakes were higher than ever. Ava knew that walking through those doors meant confronting the darkest part of her father's past, but it also meant reclaiming control of her own destiny. She pushed the doors open and stepped inside, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Inside the building, the air was cold, sterile, and silent, save for the faint hum of machinery in the distance. Ava's footsteps echoed down the long corridor as she made her way toward the conference room, where the powerful figures awaited her. She had spent days gathering information, piecing together the puzzle of her father's betrayal. But now, with the moment of confrontation upon her, every step felt like it was dragging her toward an inevitable fate. As she approached the room, she saw the shadows of the people inside through the frosted glass. Her breath caught in her throat. These were the people who had destroyed her family, who had turned her father into a pawn in a much larger game. The door swung open, and Ava walked in without hesitation. She had come for answers, for justice, and now there was no turning back. As Ava stepped into the room, a wave of tension swept over her. The figures seated around the large conference table looked up as she entered, their expressions cold, calculating. The man at the head of the table, a powerful political figure involved in her father's betrayal, leaned back in his chair, his gaze sharp and unreadable. "You've come a long way, Ava," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "But I'm afraid you're too late. The damage is done." Ava's hands clenched at her sides as she fought to keep her composure. "You're wrong," she said, her voice steady. "This isn't over. I'm here to expose the truth, no matter what it costs." The man smirked, his eyes narrowing. "And what truth is that?" he asked. "The truth about your father's mistakes? Or the truth about your own naivety?" Ava stood her ground. "The truth about everything," she replied, her voice unwavering. "And it's time for you to answer for it." The tension in the room thickened as Ava took a step forward, her eyes locked on the man at the head of the table. "You can't hide forever," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "Your actions have consequences, and people are going to know what you did." The man chuckled darkly. "You think you can expose me?" he sneered. "You're just one woman, Ava. Against all the power we hold, you don't stand a chance." Ava's eyes flashed with fury. "I'm not just one woman," she retorted. "I'm the daughter of a man you destroyed, and I will make sure everyone knows the truth about what happened." The room was silent for a long moment, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Finally the man stood up, his smile fading. "You're making a dangerous mistake, Ava," he warned. "But if you're determined to ruin your life, so be it." Ava's heart raced, but she refused to back down. "I'm not afraid anymore." The man's face twisted into a snarl as he stepped forward, his voice dripping with venom. "You have no idea what you're up against," he spat. "You think you can expose me? The people I work with will make sure you never speak again." Ava stood her ground, her pulse pounding in her ears. "It doesn't matter," she said, her voice steady. "The truth is already out there, and I'll make sure it reaches the people who need to hear it." The man took a step back, clearly frustrated by Ava's unshakable resolve. "You're too late," he repeated, but this time, there was a flicker of uncertainty in his voice. Ava felt a surge of triumph. "No," she said firmly. "You're the one who's too late. You had your chance, and now I'm taking mine." With those final words, Ava turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind the powerful figures who had once held her family in their grip. She had taken control, and nothing would ever be the same again. Ava sat in the quiet aftermath, her body finally relaxing as the weight of what she had done settled over her. She had exposed the truth, and though it had cost her more than she had ever imagined, she could feel a sense of liberation creeping in. The doors that had once seemed so locked, so impenetrable, were now open, and she had walked through them without hesitation. The media buzzed with the breaking news of the scandal she had unearthed, and for the first time in weeks, Ava allowed herself a moment to breathe. She knew that she had sacrificed much, her privacy, her peace, but in exchange, she had reclaimed her voice. The phone calls, the press conferences, the constant barrage of questions, it would all fade. But the truth, the raw honesty of everything she had uncovered, would endure. As Ava looked out of her window at the city beyond, she realized that the storm she had unleashed had passed. The sky outside was clearer now, reflecting the calm within her. The phone rang, jolting Ava from her reverie. She picked it up, recognizing the name on the screen. Lena. She had been avoiding Lena's calls ever since the fallout, unsure of what to say. "Ava," Lena's voice crackled on the other end, tentative yet filled with emotion. I don't know where to start. Ava took a deep breath, her fingers gently gripping the phone. You don't have to say anything, Lena. I've already made my peace with everything. There was a pause, the silence hanging between them. I'm sorry, Lena finally said, her voice thick with guilt. I never meant for it to go this far. I should have told you sooner. Ava's chest tightened, but she spoke softly. We both made choices, Lena. The important thing is that we both understand them now. The conversation didn't resolve everything, but it gave Ava the closure she had been seeking. She wasn't alone in this anymore. Ava had never felt the weight of her decisions more than she did now. She stood before the glass doors of her father's old office, the place where everything had started, and everything had ended. The space felt empty, haunted by memories of a man who had always been a stranger to her. The betrayal she had uncovered, the lives torn apart by the scandal, it all came rushing back as she stepped inside. The office had been left untouched, preserved in time. Ava slowly walked to the desk, her fingers grazing the papers scattered across it. It was in this room that her father had made his fateful choices. But now, as she stood there, Ava understood that it wasn't the room that held the power. It was the courage she had found to confront the past. She wasn't here to change it. She was here to let it go. The next few weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, press interviews, and public attention. But, amid it all, Ava found herself regaining a sense of control over her life. The headlines that had once screamed her father's name now turned to focus on the powerful figures who had tried to silence her. They were scrambling, trying to regain their footing in the wake of the truth being exposed. Ava's role in bringing them to justice had not only freed her father's legacy, but had also given her a platform to fight for those who had been silenced by the system. She used her voice to advocate for the truth, to ensure that the wrongs of the past were not repeated. Each day, she took small steps toward healing. The weight on her shoulders was still there, but now it was hers to carry, and hers to overcome. Ava stood on the balcony of her apartment, the city below now just a quiet hum in the distance. The events of the past months had reshaped her in ways she never thought possible. She had lost so much, her father, her peace, her sense of security. But in the end, she had gained something more important, herself. As she gazed at the horizon, the sun dipping below the skyline, Ava finally felt a sense of closure. The past was no longer a weight on her shoulders. It had become a part of her story, a story she would continue to tell on her own terms. She was no longer defined by her father's mistakes, nor by the powerful figures who had tried to control her. She was Ava, the woman who fought for truth, the woman who reclaimed her voice. The future was hers to create, and for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face it. The months following the exposure of the truth had been tumultuous, but Ava stood at the precipice of a new chapter in her life. She had regained control of her destiny, no longer haunted by the shadows of her father's betrayal or the powerful figures who sought to silence her. With each passing day, the weight on her shoulders grew lighter. The constant media attention had eventually faded, and Ava was finally able to rebuild a life that was entirely her own. As she walked down the familiar streets of the city, she no longer felt like a stranger in her own world. The chaotic noise of the past had given way to a quiet calm, and Ava was at peace with the decisions she had made. For the first time in a long time, she could see a future that was hers to shape, and it felt exhilarating. She was free to start over, free to be herself, and that was all that mattered. Ava arrived at a small cafe, a place that had once been a backdrop to her fear and uncertainty. Now, as she stepped inside, it felt like a symbol of her transformation. She took a seat by the window, the familiar clink of cups, and the soft murmur of conversation surrounding her. A feeling of contentment washed over her. This wasn't the cafe from the past, the one filled with secrets and tension. This place was now a sanctuary, a quiet space where she could enjoy the simple joys of life. As she sipped her coffee, her mind drifted back to the journey she had taken. She had faced the darkest parts of her past and had come out the other side stronger than ever. No longer a victim of circumstance, Ava had become the architect of her own destiny. The world was full of possibilities now, and she was ready to embrace them. Ava's phone buzzed on the table, breaking her moment of reflection. She glanced at the screen and saw the name of her mother, a name that still carried so much weight. Ava had reconciled with her mother in the months after the truth was revealed, but it hadn't been easy. Their relationship had been strained for so long. She answered the call, her heart racing as she lifted the phone to her ear. Ava. Her mother's voice sounded soft but steady. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. You've come so far, and I know it wasn't easy. Ava felt a warmth in her chest at the words. It had taken so long to hear them, but now they felt like the final piece of the puzzle. Thank you, Mom, Ava replied, her voice thick with emotion. I'm finally at peace with everything. There was a long silence on the line before her mother spoke again. You've always been strong, Ava. I hope you know that. Ava smiled, her heart full. I do now. Ava's life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. But as she looked out at the city once more, she realized that the hardest part was finally behind her. The truth had been exposed, the lies had been unraveled, and the pieces of her father's betrayal had been put to rest. Now, it was time for her to move forward. She had always been a daughter of her father's legacy, but she was no longer bound by it. The woman who had walked through the darkness of secrets and scandal had emerged into the light of a new day, ready to embrace the future with courage and determination. Ava took a deep breath, feeling the wind on her face as she looked up at the sky. There was a freedom in her soul now, one that could never be taken away. The world was vast, and Ava was ready to explore it, one step at a time. Ava walked through the city streets one last time, not with the weight of fear or uncertainty, but with a sense of purpose and clarity. The journey had been long and painful, but it had led her to a place of peace. As she moved through the crowd, she felt a sense of belonging that had once eluded her. She had come into her own, no longer defined by the past, but shaped by her own choices and strength. The future was hers to create, and Ava knew that it would be beautiful. The city around her seemed to embrace her, its energy matching her own as she moved forward. With each step, she shed the remnants of the past, leaving them behind as she embraced the new life that awaited her. Ava had finally found the courage to let go, to move on, and to take control of her own story. She was ready for whatever came next.